On today's episode of the Unveil Podcast, you may get sick of my voice because it is a solo cast with yours truly, Victoria Fenton. Today I'm going to walk you through the updates from Unveil, from Aletheia. It's not going to take me very long, but it does link to the topic of today's podcast. I want to discuss how to sign your perfect clients every time. Now, obviously, this is an Unveil podcast, therefore it's a podcast with a difference. This isn't a tactic, tips, techniques, marketing strategy. This is about how to avoid the complexity of signing people when you're putting them into a high-pressured situation and you may be getting a yes that isn't authentic. This is a great podcast to listen to if you're a coach, if you're a healing professional, if you are anyone who signs up anyone to your services, either on a one-to-one or in a group capacity. I hope you enjoy this episode. I do make a request at the end for your inspiration. Whether you want to hear more of these solo episodes, whether you want to hear more interviews, and who you would like those interviews to be with, including you. If you are a listener but would like to be interviewed on the Unveil podcast, I am taking applications now. Okay, with that, let's get on with more of me talking to you, my dear listeners, about everything Unveil. Hello, my beautiful Unveil podcast listeners. Today I am flying solo, which is interesting for me. It's not uncommon that I have spoken to a blank computer screen for hours. For anyone who saw my South African Ideas Cartel lectures, that was pretty much like this. But I have literally like 6 bullet points of notes, and I'm just going to talk to you, the wonderful Unveil podcast listeners. So I'm going to begin this episode with updates and some information about where we've been moving, what's been happening. You may have noticed some shifts. You will just have listened to the humongous episode of Unveil Deep Dive with Brace. You will also notice that I'm doing a lot more solo interviews. I'm doing some in-person stuff. So there's a lot that's moving and a lot that's feeling very big and aligned. But it's also possibly quite confusing from the user's perspective. So where I'm going to start today is Aletheia. Now, people who followed me for a long, long time will know that Aletheia almost existed before, then kind of half existed about 2 weeks ago. And now it's existing in a different format once again. The reason for this is honestly a personal evolution. I can't explain it in any other way. This isn't some crazy business decision. This isn't, me trying to be confusing or rationally thinking that it's sensible to create 17 different websites in 3 months. It's honestly, for me, I've been on a very big journey since I left London in February of 2020. I think the whole world has been on a journey, but for me, it's very much included some evaluation of what I really needed to be doing with my life. And that speaks to today's major topic, which is going to be how to sign your perfect client every time, no matter whether you are a healthcare professional, a nutritionist, a dietitian, a coach, anything. It's how to find your perfect match from a client perspective. And I think this is why it's linked to the evolution that Unveil has been through in the last few months. Indeed, certainly, particularly in the last kind of week. I move fast. Essentially, for me, when I left London, I was running away. I was leaving a very stressful, very intense, full-time functional medicine practice in which I was the only one doing absolutely everything. My clinic was very successful. My work was very highly regarded. And yet I had a reputation for dealing with the most difficult cases because I did. It's part of my wheelhouse to do that. The reality of it is, however, that when you're doing that, there is there's a burden that's placed on you as a practitioner and as a professional. And I look back at my diary and my Google Calendar from those times now, and I'm sort of reel back in horror about literally how overscheduled every minute was. Because I know that after every client, I would fill in, I would write them a 26-page report, et cetera, et cetera. So I left London really trying to find some space and knowing that this was not aligned. And that decision over the course of the next year turned into, I really need to bring back some of the spirituality, as my friend called it. You need to go back to the stars, which is kind of accurate. given how much human design and gene keys I'm now doing. But in honesty, it was very much a case of I needed to find the bits that I'd missed and wasn't quite fully owning about my functional medicine work, which was that I was mostly coaching people. I was mostly supporting people from a energetic, mindset medicine, somatic, although I wouldn't necessarily have called it that at the time, level, and from the foundation of the nervous system, which I always spoke about within my functional medicine practice. So the segue into becoming a coach and actually really going, no, I'm going to formalize my coach training. I'm going to polish off these few certifications and add a few more and really move into that area and practice it has taken the last year. And it's been a very important part of my journey. It's been a very important thing for me to see and to start to understand what I was doing all along with my functional medicine clients, but that I really wasn't saying I was doing. And it was really important for me to discover that I knew a lot because I have been in this industry working on myself and others, working on myself for certain for over 20 years, and then working with others for at least 8 in professional practice. But even so, before that, I was doing a lot of this work. And I'd been doing human design and gene keys readings for lots of my friends for lots of years. So within all of that, that allowed me to understand that the Unveil Academy needed to exist. Moving into this coaching space from a place of functional medicine, you recognize the unregulation. You start to understand how, from a medical perspective, we are bound by regulations and rules and things that we cannot say and things that we absolutely shouldn't say. And also, I was working with a chiropractor out in South Africa where their legislation on advertisement is even stronger. And so becoming familiar with like the things that you are allowed to say you can do and not is something that I'm really passionate about. It really matters. That's not to say that South Africa was entirely not overzealous, but in any case. And then you move into the coaching world where you can literally say you're a life coach today on the interwebs and start to earn money. And that really troubles me, given the fact that the biggest thing that I see in people who are attracted to doing this work are people who have been attracted to doing it because they needed it for themselves. And therefore, by default, these people, we have trauma. We have a past and a legacy of pain and suffering and challenge that we may, to some degree, have overcome somehow with something. That doesn't make us qualified to start giving it to other people. And so realistically, I looked at the level of education for coaching and understood very quickly that people who were getting qualified in a 4-day weekend or a online course only, there needed to be an alternative. There needed to be a solid, integrative, holistic, transformational coaching training. So I created it. It was not supposed to be out in September of this year, but for one reason and another, it's being pulled out of me. And building that enables me to step back slightly and go, okay, so what do I do on a one-to-one basis? And this is where Aletheia has been on a little bit of an evolution. I realized, with the help of my coach, who you will have heard speak a couple of weeks ago on the Unveil podcast, that I had almost severed a limb of my own when I left for South Africa and refused to do functional medicine any longer. I have been feeling slightly misaligned for a very long time with regards to not helping the people who I know I really need to help. And I think that as I've moved to Austin and realized that there is a lot of complex chronic illness here, and I have a toolkit, and it's not okay for me to say, oh, but I'm not going to use that significant tool, particularly when I'm training people to use all the tools in their toolkit. It doesn't quite work to have this big part of what I do. And more specifically, the people that I can help. So those people with complex chronic illness, multiple reactivity syndromes, complex digestive disorders, fertility concerns, pediatrics. These are all within my wheelhouse, not because I'm a functional medicine practitioner through and through and I'm going to do the protocols, because I am a coach, because I am someone who is always working on the physiological whole entire entity, from the function and the structure through to the nervous system behavior and therefore trauma. So the Aletheia group, has now turned into the Aletheia Clinic, which many of you will know if you kind of stalked me on the interwebs and found me on social media. I am baffled by how fast the universe has moved since me going, oh, do you know what? I'm going to bring back in functional medicine. It feels like the world has been waiting for me to wake up and actually just acknowledge what I really do. My coach, if he's listening to this, is like laughing his head off because he's like, oh, Victoria. And everybody does this to me. It's like I need willful blindness for a good period of time before I can actually step into what I am truly and what I really need to do. And I'm good with that. It's actually written into my human design that I need to not know until I know. And then when I have the realization, I completely forget what happened. And it's something that I know a lot about me. So functional medicine's back. Particularly for those in the Austin area, particularly for those who I can get to see in person. I will at some point have a clinic space here. And eventually the big long-term plan for the Aletheia clinic is to have a brick and mortar location in Austin that is already designed in my brain. It's so beautiful. It's going to need to be built. So it's all happening. So within that and the launch of the Unveil Academy, so by the time you're listening to this, we are going to be at the beginning of August. You will have missed the cutoff for summer school, but if you're really quick and you really want to get in, you might need to just send us an email and we might let you in. I am preparing to run a really small cohort for the first year of the Unveil Academy. I'm really good with that. I really want the intimacy to be there. And that means that if you are interested, there is the very real potential. We have 4 people signed up already who will be doing this with us. But there's very real potential that you might be one of a very select handful of people to be in my orbit learning from me this year. So I'm going to pause there on updates because all of this stuff is available somewhere else. What I really want to talk about is the evolution of professionals within a service space and a little bit of the how to sign your perfect client that I was talking about earlier. So I think the thing about this, so this idea came to me because of something that I'm experiencing somewhere else where client mismatch has been happening. And the reality is that this happens because people from the professional perspective are tracking their metrics and their needs from a financial and professional perspective more than they're tracking the nervous system of the person that they're sitting opposite when they sign a client. It's not something that is taught anywhere but within the Unveil Academy because people who go into the service business, it's a business. You are supposed to get clients. You're supposed to sign people up. You're supposed to have people on your books. You're supposed to practice. You're supposed to say yes, because saying yes to the universe is what you have to do in order to make life work. Well, yes, and I hate doing that. It's a very coachy thing, but there is no way that you are supposed to say yes to everything that the universe puts in front of you. It wouldn't be a decision if you had to just say yes to everything. And I know that there's people who are currently disagreeing because some influencer somewhere said yes to everything and look at where their life ended up. And I think from a social experiment, that's quite interesting. But from the perspective of a professional, particularly in a service-based business where you have to deliver a service to the nervous system of the person that's signed up to work with you, there is a very great difference between saying yes to everything and saying yes to just the right things. And I think that when we're in business, particularly when we're building, and particularly when we're, launching something that's precious to us or launching something that means something, there is the tendency to think more is better. As I've just said about the Unveil Academy founding member cohort, it may be very, very small indeed. And I'm really okay with that because I know that just because it's precious to me doesn't mean I want to say yes to every single person who walks towards it. The reason I know that is past experience of saying yes to people who were really not a good fit. And this is not personal against those people by any stretch of the imagination. This is not that. Everyone gets to work with the person that they're perfect for. It's why if you come towards Aletheia for our concierge services, there are steps to get there because we don't know that we're the perfect people for you. We know we're really good at what we do, but we don't know we're really good for you. And I think the distinction for professionals working in this industry has to start before you even start doing onboarding calls. It has to start in your creation of your, and I hate the word, but avatar. And I don't really do this from a perspective of I work with people who are this age and this demographic, and it's a 6-word sentence of people who you serve. What I do is I step back and I go, hang on a second, like, what is the character, or more specifically, the type of person that I want to spend my time with? And when it comes to service, it has to be that sense of, okay, are you doing high touch? And coaching is very high touch. It's very immersive. It's very in the aura of, even if you're working virtually, it's very in the presence of. Who do you want to be the person who spends that time with you? And I think before you even start getting into these kind of discovery calls, as they would call them in the coaching industry, the question has to become, who do I want to work with? And I think this is the funniest thing. And I'm seeing it in a couple of clients that I'm working with at the moment, where I'm mentoring them professionally as well as working on some other stuff. It's like, they keep asking me questions about what they should do and who they should work with, and questions about money and things. And I'm like, this coaching isn't outsourcing your brain to me. I can't make these decisions for you. My coach didn't tell me who to work with and what to do. Coaching is about inviting that out of somebody. So as the person sitting in the service position, you have to invite this out of yourself. You have to grasp that there is a trajectory for your evolution as a professional. And even though it may be ending up somewhere else, where is it right now, today? What's your current capacity, and what is your scope of practice? And I know that this is a dear thing to me, based on medical history, but based on witnessing a ton of people practicing outside their scope of practice. And it's very common in the coaching industry. There is a realm where if you know what you're doing and you feel comfortable, then that's where you should be. Sure, stretch your edges, learn new things. I'm currently in the middle of one training about somatics, and I'm about to do the full somatic experiencing training. And that's because I have an edge there that I want to explore. It doesn't mean that, after a weekend in August, I'm going to be able to take somebody into their trauma. That's not what I'm going to do. That's not my scope of practice. So when I map my scope of practice, I automatically know who I cannot work with. Physiologically, it's not going to be a fit. And then from that perspective, there's still a lot of hoops to go through. But if we start as professionals by understanding that we are the locus of control, it's up to us to understand who suits us. Who do we want to say yes to? And I think the other thing is the scarcity mindset that breeds the say yes to everything from a financial perspective, particularly if you're just starting and you've got a bottom line that you need to pay attention to. It's so fascinating to me that this is where people hang out. It's like, this feeling like saying no is saying something more than just no to that one person. It's like, I'm a no to money if I say no. It's like, no, you're a no to what's right for you if you say no to the people who are wrong for you. And I think it's funny, particularly when we're trying to fill programs that have a start date and an expectation and a minimum that we really needed to have on those programs. It's like, how do we then make the decisions? And we're very lucky at Unveil. People tend to self-select in or out. But I know for sure that that's certainly not always the case. And I think what is possible within a discovery call kind of situation, or a discovery event situation, is that actually what coaches are mostly doing is triggering people into a trauma response. And I think this is happening because of the way you're told to do this in the coaching industry and the way it's set up. You have to close that person that moment. You offer incentives for early decision making. You create a scenario where, putting down a deposit today will give you some kind of benefit or perk or bonus. We've even done it ourselves by creating summer school, so that if you sign up by August the 1st, you get summer school. And to me, I will contemplate that for next year. It's like, is that really aligned with the Unveil ethos of everything? For me, it came out of really wanting to talk about gene keys. And also feeling like promising something in September is a very long way away. So we wanted something in the interim, but we didn't offer discounts. So you will see there's no early bird discounts. There's a whole year where we're doing it cheaper, but there was no kind of pressure. You get it cheaper if you do it now. There's none of that. And the reason that exists is because every time you're putting pressure on someone, you are playing into the potential that they will make a decision from a space of dysregulation rather than from a space of regulation. Every time you are actually pressing buttons of stress, you're literally stressing someone. And when they're making a decision from that space of stress, they're making that decision based on motivations which are not fully cognitive. Literally, the biochemistry of stress will divert blood away from the neocortex, the self-reflection. But it's more than that. That would be great if we just made decisions with our minds. If anyone knows anything about my human design beliefs and the making decisions from the body perspective, if you're pushing me into stress, I'm still dysregulated. I am away from the capacity to hear, for me, my sacral response. I'm not there doing that. I'm very much there making the wrong decision because I'm feeling pressure. There's a whole suite of human design understanding, which is also about motivation and transference of motivation. And it's not transference from a psychological perspective. It's actually just being transferred in terms of being motivated from the wrong perspective. And that's really possible to happen when you have high pressure sales techniques and tactics. Now, do I think if you're selling a product that you can't use these? No. Do I think that if you're selling a service, you can't use these? No. But it will color the kind of yes you get. And I think that's the element to really focus on. When you're doing longer term, intensive, immersive coaching packages with people, what matters is the quality of the yes, not the speed of the yes. And I think people get this wrong all the time, particularly when we look at bottom line and the monthly cadence of bills that need paying, and this is tax season and we need to close this year and all this sort of stuff. And it's great, it's business savvy. Oh my goodness, is it business savvy? Would my business be much more financially prosperous if I had all these tactics in place? Potentially. But the reality is that this is why we run into problems as coaches. We listen to the marketing spiel, and we focus on feeling like we need to do it a certain way. All of that is just not trusting the product itself, whether that's you, your program, your package, your, whatever it is. And there's a interesting thing about trust, because it really requires dual trust in oneself, but also trust in the universe, or whatever you want to type or pattern that. It's that, can I trust in the external abundance principle that the next person will be a better yes, a more aligned yes? And I think for some part of this kind of getting the right clients, signing the right clients every time, the reality is that we often feel that it's not possible to say no if the incoming inquiries are low. This worked in my functional medicine practice too. This is why I got so burnt out. I had no filters. My pricing was potentially a filter. I was priced out of most people's potential budgets intentionally to make me that hard to get to, because I was one human doing everything. And also my services were highly in nuanced. So my price was a filter, but if somebody said yes to paying the price, there were no more filters. I didn't add a process of intake which prevented people who were not a fit from getting to work with me. And that's draining in the extreme. When you're dealing with particularly someone's complex chronic physiological illness, or somebody's complex, emotional state, or somebody's complex business plan, or whatever, you're dealing with a human being. And taking people on who are in a space of some kind of specific vulnerability is a very definite decision that you as a service provider have to make. And when you make that decision, you also have to put parameters on it, which I did not do when I was running the functional medicine practice that I had in London. I said yes to everyone, because I started for 2 years and had no clients. So when I got successful, I forgot to update my kind of operating system of, I'm allowed to have what is known as discernment. And discernment isn't saying no because I'm a nasty person. It's saying no because if I am not flourishing, I am not serving, not truly. And that was the reality in my functional medicine practice in London. I wasn't doing my clients a disservice? Absolutely not. But I would sit and write reports with resentment that I wasn't getting my weekend. And I would feel that this person just wasn't doing it. And it's like, if I look back, I could have seen the red flags that they did not want my approach in the first conversation. And that's the other thing. What red flags are we looking for? And I think once you've established your avatar and the person that you really want to work with, and you know your scope of practice, having that first conversation is a different ball game, because you realistically understand the tram lines within which you're working. Now, it's always common to want to step outside of those. And you can, like, there's no rules. People are running their own businesses when they do this. There's no rules. And there is also the reality that stepping outside your tram lines has to be for a very good reason. So when it comes to the process of running that discovery call, I want to be really revelatory here. How about you don't have an agenda of signing the client? Like, just don't. Like, a sales call is one thing, but what if it's just a discovery call, like literally a discovery call? Let's actually work out whether we want to work together, and not just say it. Like, there's some people who are very good at training people to say, this is to work out if we're a fit. And I don't know how many of those people are actually sitting on the other end of that consultation working that question out. I wonder if they're just trying to get to a yes. And so my deepest recommendation for people in this kind of coaching healthcare professional world is go into that discovery call with the mindset of curiosity. Do I want to work with this person? Is this person speaking to my skill set in a way that I know that I have to help them? Is it being called out of me that I really feel aligned to the service of this person? And do they feel like they're going to walk with me on this journey in a way that suits the way I need to serve, because it's in my wheelhouse? And so I'll be super specific about my stuff here. If some client now I have discernment and I've actually worked out that I need to say no. If a client comes to me now and wants to do a load of functional medicine testing, genetic testing, methylation testing, gut testing, and wants the protocol and wants to find their diagnosis and label, that to me, it's now a red flag. It's not, I'll rephrase that. That's an amber flag. That's okay. Then in my discovery call, I talk about my process. I talk about the way I work and the fact that it's attentive to the nervous system, because it's the only way to truly heal from these conditions. And that looks like, and I'm not coy, I am not obtuse about what I'm actually doing when I'm working with people. I mention the practices that I use. I mention the variety in terms of support. And I'm lucky. I can do anything. I can be very hands-off and just give protocols, but I will only now do that if I also know that someone is working with coaches and body workers and other people. I can be very kind of involved and do it all, but I will only do that if I also know that the person is wanting to go on that journey. And so for me, as the professional in this scenario, it's about empowering my client who's sitting opposite from me on a discovery call with knowing what they're getting into, like knowing, not necessarily, and people who've had a discovery call with me will go, well, Victoria has no flipping structure, because I don't typically. But there is a method to my madness, and explaining my method, explaining the way it works, explaining the way it feels to walk through a package with me is the only way to type the people who are going to come towards me and to know whether that's the person to work with. So that's a super specific red flag to my business, but you'll know with your own historic clients, if you're listening to this thinking, oh, I'm suddenly remembering all the reasons I went wrong. And honestly, I'm making it sound like I know what I'm talking about, but I know what I'm talking about because it's gone wrong often enough for me. Not too frequently, certainly not too frequently where the client actually was like, this is no good anymore, but a lot of wrongness from me feeling burnt out and drained. So when it comes to other red flags, I think there are some that are pretty universal, and I've seen them happen a couple of times, and I've watched, and not in my containers, luckily, and I've watched them, people sign up to things, and I just was waiting for the wheels to fall off. If someone says to me, this is a big investment, I want to do it, but I'm not going to tell my husband, partner, significant other, parent how much it costs, that I start to worry about. And the reason for that is not because it's my responsibility to manage their relationships or to tell them what they should tell their partners, but because within the vulnerability of service and containers like coaching containers, there's a necessary destabilization that is caused. And if somebody's walking into a world for healing or for growth, especially growth, actually, it is inherently destabilizing. Their one supportive influence is their significant other, their parent, their partner, whoever it is. And if they're lying on the on-ramp, that's to me going to give me pause. And pause because why are they lying? Do they have sufficient infrastructure around them to embark on the kind of vulnerability that the work is going to entail? Because if they don't have that supportive infrastructure, chances are I, as the professional, am going to become that supportive infrastructure. And it's a choice. And this is the thing that I keep seeing with the clients that I'm working with at the moment. When I look at this, and I thought I need to just create some resources around this for people, for our academy, for, you guys today on the podcast. It's like, we forget to remember that everything we do within our own professional world, particularly when we're in this space of healing professionals, coaches, it's a choice that we get to make. We get to choose whether we just do group programs. We get to choose whether we do one-to-one. We get to choose what that one-to-one looks like. We get to choose our level of access. And we set the expectation by the price point we then put on things and by the availability we then put on ourselves. And that sets a tone that your clients will play into. But if you are doing something that is stretchy, and most of these containers are, you have to expect that stuff is going to come up. Does that mean you should never do anything because you're at risk of touching people's trauma? No, because you would never do anything because you're always at risk of touching people's trauma. But does that mean that you should have an infrastructure in place for when you do? Yes. And this is the thing that I was starting to build with Aletheia before I left London. And it's the thing that I'm intent on building right now as I sit in Austin. Networks, 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 networks. There is always the potential for your perfect client to drop into a red flag status later on. But seeing and spotting the trigger is the professional's responsibility. It's also our responsibility to know where to direct people once that trigger has been pressed. You can't save everyone and you can't solve everything, but there is always if someone has come to you for growth and healing and potential, and something starts to go wrong, there is no reason for you to stop being a serving professional just because you're going to lose money, lose a client, you get to do this from an energetically pure perspective and find the person in your network who is necessary to support that person. Now, some people won't take that support, but that doesn't mean it's not our responsibility to offer and provide it. And to provide this is okay, this is normal, this is natural, stuff comes up, let's see what we can do together. Parameters around the difficulty that is established. And I think that the biggest thing that I would love if more coaches started to pay attention to, and healing professionals, is body language. It's so clear if you just take a little bit of time and research a little bit. It's really obvious when someone is physiologically giving you all the signals that they may not be a fit. Just a few for instances. If you're kind of giving them your offer and they become really wide-eyed and they want to be involved and it becomes very kind of kind of overzealous and you can feel it's inauthentic, they've probably stepped into a bit of what we call a fawn response because they've been triggered somewhere by something. If somebody's saying yes, but everything in their posture is closing down and they're finding it challenging, there's something about that is worth investigating. It doesn't mean none of these are absolute no's. I think that's the other thing. It's like I've written red flag on my page and didn't write anything because it's like nothing is just instinctively a red flag always. Everyone is different. Everyone manifests their patterns of response differently. And it's up to us to, if we're going to work in the kind of world of helping people, it's up to us to understand how to read people. It's a big part of the reason why I built the academy as well. It's like, even if you're not a coach, knowing how to track someone's reality in the moment that they're sitting opposite from you is really important. I have a spiel in my kind of discovery calls, which is less so now. But I would always say to people, you're not making a decision today. I do it slightly differently now, depending on their human design. If I have it beforehand, which I try to do. But it's like, we're not making a decision today. This is just an exploration. And I think that the more we can construct trauma-aware onboarding, the more we stand a chance of having clients who are actually sold into the process, even when it gets hard. And it isn't enough to write that in your contract and say, this is going to get difficult. It's like your ability to set the scene of safety on the on-ramp is going to be a key foundational element of your clients finding the ability to ascertain that safety, even in the midst of the stretchiness in the middle of everything that you're doing with them. So when it comes to recognizing the potential pitfalls, I think the process that I would absolutely recommend is awareness of you and awareness of the other. I sense that when a lot of coaches and professionals go into trying to have these discovery calls or whatever it is, there is no sense of the other. It's all this internal agenda of this needs to happen. I need this client. I've got this bill to pay, or I really want my clinic to be full, or maybe this is a famous person and they could do some good for my business. And I've fallen into that trap. Definitely. It's very easy to lose our instincts when we're trying to have the outcome that we think is the one that we want. Which brings me back a little bit to human design. I believe, this is again why I've created the Academy, I do believe that every coach would be benefited from knowing their design as they go into a discovery call or a pitch meeting. I know for a fact that I could say 1,000,001 reasons and things to watch, but there's nothing better than following your own authority when it comes to a human design reality. Now, there are different timescales for that, but there are only a few authorities. It doesn't take a lot to learn yours. And then you can actually understand, if you are a splenic authority, you have to be sitting in those sessions, literally instinctively feeling everything from your own physiology to gauge whether this is really someone who's signed up in a yes. If you're an emotional authority, you absolutely do not need to be making a decision about whether this client is for you in that call. You as a coach, do not need to make that decision. You get to go, I need to sleep on it, especially manifesting generators who are emotional. Please sleep on more decisions. If you're a projector, are you feeling this person call to your specific skill set? Absolutely essential. Is this person calling you out, calling you forth? If you're a reflector, what are all your spidey senses saying? All of them. And if you're a mental projector, again, don't make decisions, but talk it out with the person, throw the things at the wall. And that just will allow you to simply be tuned into yourself, not from my metrics and my spreadsheets say X, Y, Z, but from what is my body resonating with for this time, this client, this person. I actually had a conversation the other day with someone, and I said, the more people in my business come in, love it, have a call, freak out, run away, and come back later. I have had more, particularly in my functional medicine world, I have had more clients come back to me and say, Victoria, you were right. Later, much later. And I kind of love that. Obviously I love being right, but I more love that it's work to work with me. I know that not every coach is like this. I know it is work to work with me. It's deconstructive. It is destabilizing, and it's work. Like, as I say, it's effortful. I'll rephrase that. It feels like a process. So if somebody says yes immediately without truly feeling into that process, they're not prepared. So I would much rather people went away and then came back years later sometimes. I remember one of my clients, particularly, it was one of my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome clients. And of course, I I had been through exactly the same process that they were going through. So I could speak with a good degree of authority of what was necessary to heal. And all they wanted was the test or the horrific Barrett's esophagus diagnosis or just something that they could treat. And I was like, oh, it's just a nervous system problem. Let's just work on like regulation and things and resourcing. And they were not very happy. And then about a year later, I got a phone call. You were right. And it, that I love because we are not able to tell someone an experiential knowing. And I think this is the thing that coaches get wrong all the time. Your clients are struggling because of a way they have experienced their reality that has left them with patterns that are a specific way. Our job isn't to tell them that it's not true. Our job isn't to tell them, hang on a second, life is this way over here. Our job is to nourish their nervous systems to go on the journey of repatterning. And repatterning doesn't happen because I say this is true. Repatterning happens through experience. So when we're actually trying to understand, why does it take people to say, yeah, I know my product's amazing. Why does it people take so long to say yes? Well, the reason is they don't know it's amazing. Doesn't matter how much you tell them it's amazing. That felt sense of amazing and buy-in has to come from them. So if you are feeling this person's saying yes with their mouth, but everything about them feels like it's a no, say you don't think it's a fit right now. What's the consequence of saying no? This is the reality of being a healing human for our clients. We get to be the boundary that they maybe have not been able to set for themselves. Will they be disappointed? Perhaps. Will they feel let down by you? Perhaps. Will they never come towards you again? Maybe. But who are you serving if you take on someone who isn't regulated and saying yes with a quality of absolute commitment, but is saying yes from the place of stress or fear or caution that is overzealous? Now, I'm just going to put a few caveats on this and maybe disagree with everything I've just said, but people are going to be nervous, especially if your packages are expensive. People are going to be anxious. They're going to have trepidation. They're going to feel feelings like signed a client recently. And just the chaos that happened from her kind of yes to the getting them on board. It was the fun. I mean, I was sitting here laughing. They were not. We did laugh about it in our first session, but it's like chaos happens because the universe is doing other stuff. Like it's not all about me and the person. There's a whole world of consciousness that's also happening. And we have to honor that turbulence may be a natural part of the process of onboarding. Turbulence, absolutely. But that should always be a secondary to a felt full yes before the turbulence begins. And I expect turbulence after the full yes. Maybe I just have a weird practice. I know I have a weird practice. But I don't expect turbulent energy in the first point of getting to yes, because then I know I've just signed a traumatized client. And so what happens if you've signed a traumatized client? Apart from the network, apart from everything else, do you have to sign them off straight away? A lot depends on what you're trying to do. If you are doing very high touch, high level, and their trauma is coming out like a demand of more and more and more, there is only so much boundary setting you can do that is going to empower the whole situation, because their demands at that point are not particularly about you and your service. It's much more about their needs being met. And what I mean by that is the core of trauma, the core of most basically neglect-based traumas is needs not being met for a significant period of time. If you're thinking about somebody with major trauma, that's obviously not the case, but the majority of the kind of unconscious trauma that's happening in most people is this needs not being met. If that emerges in a coaching container or in a professional services business situation, and the feeling from the professional perspective is, oh my God, they're asking so much of me. I can't, it's like they're bleeding me dry, which was what was happening to me in my practice in London. The reality is, one, I was unguarded and that was my fault. But two, these people were looking at me to meet all of their needs. And that typically is the manifestation of their needs not being met in childhood, in, their normal life. And at that point, it falls to being within your scope of practice as to whether you can have a conversation about that and point out the transference of outsourcing reliance onto you, or whether you feel like the professional responsible thing to do is to recognize that this is a situation that's escalated beyond where it needs to be, and the time has come to have the conversation that terminates the contract. Those conversations are never easy. The conversations are they're never smooth when what you are trying to do is say to someone whose needs have never been met, I can't meet your needs either. It's a big thing. And it's at that point where I would suggest that people have a bit of training around this. It's not difficult to get training in trauma awareness, being trauma informed. It really isn't difficult. I will put the link in the show notes again to Trauma and Somatics with Will Reason and Ariana Joy, because it's 3 months of your life. It's 3 months of amazing time with exceptional coaches, by the way. But at the end of it, you are so much more aware of the potentials. And this is not just for coaches. This is for everyone who is working with human beings, which is everyone. You are literally standing yourself in a better position to have difficult conversations, to reorient someone who's going through a challenge by just allowing them to take some of the sovereignty back without it causing catastrophes. If you have a bit of trauma education, I feel like, what do I feel like? I feel like I'm trying not to say things that I don't want to say. It really isn't difficult to get yourself educated about this sort of stuff. And I personally believe that it is our professional duty, if we stand up and say we can help you as a human being, that we actually fully understand what human beings are really going through. And that means knowing about trauma, knowing about nervous systems, knowing enough to know how to self-regulate so that you are not spilling damage onto other people. Full stop. You don't actually need to know about other people, but you could. This is just good behavior. It's just right behavior, especially if you have the title of anything that means you work with any other human doing anything that could potentially be triggering. Think buying houses, funeral directors, think, divorce lawyers, any kind of lawyer, to be fair. If I'm speaking to a lawyer, I'm automatically dysregulated. You need to do the work so that you understand how to help me. Like this soapbox, I'm going to get off it. It's just so easy. It's easy and it's cheap. So I apologize to all of my listeners. This is the problem with having a solo cast. I can just go on a rant and keep talking. Many of our long-term listeners are saying in their heads, she can do that when she's actually talking to anyone, which is absolutely true. So how to sign your perfect client every time is that complex, or also much more simple. Be self-aware of what you need in your agency. Monitor and track what they're doing and how they're feeling as they move through, and don't need it. If we approach all of this without need, the truth is that we will likely be in better places, because the spots on your course don't need to be filled. The client gap that you have doesn't need to be filled. You think it does because you think that's what your life is supposed to be doing. The only reason the Academy is happening this year, people, is because I had 4 clients drop out at the last minute. They said yes, then life happened. Crazy life happened in situations which you could not predict. And did I go, oh my goodness, I need to fill these client slots? Yeah, for a bit. And then I was like, space, opportunity. What can I do with the time that I now have? And the answer was build a huge academy and 14 more websites. I jest, but in essence, we don't know what's best for us. We don't know what we really need. And if that program that you love just keeps having problems, maybe review it. Maybe look at what is the expectation that you're setting up that's not being met? Were you really in love with it? Or did you just feel like it was a good business model? I think that's the case with a lot of group programs. It's like, one to many, earn loads more money. And it's like, So that's my soliloquy on signing clients with integrity. I feel like there's a groundswell within me of a desire to deliver more and more education. Actually, that's what's happening for me. Like, I love my one-to-one work, but I want to do less of it because I like teaching. I also like messing around with, cameras and lighting and podcasts and stuff like that. So, but what I would love to know from you all is suggestions of stuff that you want to know. I am going to be doing an entire kind of functional medicine series on my Aletheia Clinic and Victoria Fenton Instagram, where I will be taking topics and educating on them at some point. I also will be doing some breakdowns of stuff for the Unveil Academy. As I write the modules, I will be talking about them because I think that also is service and it's interesting. But I would really love to hear from you. If you're a coach, if you're a functional medicine practitioner, if you're someone who works in the healing arts, if you're an estate agent who sells houses, what do you need to know? What don't you know? What do you feel like is missing in your educational horizon? Or what would you just like to hear me riff on for however long I've been talking, which I actually don't know. So that's the updates from Unveil. I have kind of enjoyed talking to myself for a while, which makes me slightly worried. I have some fabulous interviews coming up. I want to do more interviews. So if you want to be on the Unveil podcast and be interviewed by me, let me know. Because I really want to get more people on because I love talking, as you've probably noticed. All right. With that, I'm going to leave you, my lovely listeners, to your day. And I hope this has been of value to you. If it has, and we've never asked for this because we're not very marketing savvy, do go and leave us a review on iTunes, however you do that. I know that it's complicated because I tried to do it for someone the other day and it was like, this could be easier, but you do have to go onto Apple Podcasts, go on, leave us a review, tell us what you think. Even if you think we're terrible, we don't need positive reviews. We would like them, but just go and tell the world about us if you think that that's something that you would like to do. All right. And with that, I shall leave you to my own voice again, telling you that the Unveil Academy is starting its founding member cohort year in September of this year. I would love to see more people there. I have no limit to how many people come, just having said, by the way, that it could be small. Like, if you want to come and bring all your friends, please do. Honestly, the platform, I showed it to someone the other day who has signed up to join us, and they were like, oh, this is so cool. And it is. Myself and my assistant have spent a long time tinkering with the back end of platforms. So anyway, please go and check out the Aletheia Clinic website. I love it. I'm finally proud of it. I feel like it's taken a long time for me to get there. It's taken me a long time to get to where I am today. It's taken me probably 36 years, but certainly 20, and definitely since I left London. But things are starting to come together and things are starting to feel like I'm where the world wants me to be. So I love that you're along for this journey if you've managed to listen to me waffle on for this long. And I will bring you a really great interview in next week's episode. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Unveil Podcast. Please do remember that registration is now open for the Unveil Coach Training Certification course beginning in September of this year. If you are interested in becoming a coach, or as we like to call it, an integrative healing professional, then this is the course for you. A good bit of coach training mixed with human design and human physiology, and lots of information about being in business as a trauma-aware coach. All of the details can now be found at unveilacademy.com/launch.